Welcome back to Self Invested, where we talk about how you can do better with money. This video is going to be the first in a series where I talk to shared owners, people that have used a shared ownership scheme, and people that have used the Help to Buy Equity loan scheme about their experience, so you can hear firsthand about how the schemes work and get a better understanding of how they work. In this video, I speak to Alex, a YouTube lifestyle, travel, and Christian vlogger, about her shared ownership experience. And I specifically talked to her about her experience in selling her shared ownership flat. I came across Alex after one of her videos about selling her shared ownership home popped up on my YouTube feed, and it's a very interesting watch, and that's the reason why I wanted to bring her onto my channel to talk about her experience, because I thought that you guys would find it very useful. So if you want to watch that video, you can find it down in the description to this video. Also, she said that if you have any questions after watching our chat, you can contact her on Instagram, and her details are down in the description as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you at the next one. So when did you purchase your shared ownership property, and why did you even buy into shared ownership?
So I purchased it in, oh gosh, when was it? So 2018, so January 2018. And so prior to that, I'd been renting, I'd been doing intermediate rent, and I'm not sure if the scheme's still available. But it's basically a scheme where you only had to pay, I think it was like you paid 80% of the market price as opposed to 100%. And the idea is that you save that money and then you can potentially buy that property that you're in. So that was what I was doing. And then
that wasn't rent to buy. It was a similar scheme to rent to buy.
I think it was similar because it wasn't called rent to buy. It was
it
just
called London Living?
it was
London
just
Living Rent.
rent, and basically,
Yeah.
So you didn't have to buy that property, but the idea was that you could save, like, because you were only spending 80% of the market value, like whatever.
You could save 20% towards your deposit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where did you? I forgot to ask you. Where did you find out about that scheme?
It was literally a Google search.
Oh, okay.
So I was looking for somewhere to live, and this was like, so this was January 2013, 14 maybe. 14. So I was looking for somewhere to live, and I just did like a Google search of like flats in London, and this scheme came up. Just happened to.
You know what? I reckon it's probably I'm gonna do some research into it, and then I'll probably leave a comment down under the video or something in the description if that scheme still exists. So just if anyone's interested in it, they can sort of look into it. But I think it might have been remodeled into the rent to buy scheme. I'm guessing it is, but I'll check that anyway. Cool. But yeah, so you're renting through the intermediate.
Yeah. So I did that, and then so the idea is that you do that for 5 years, and then after the 5 years, you can think about buying the property or a property, whatever, on shared ownership. So when it got to the end of the 5 years, I considered buying my property, but the price had gone up quite a lot. So when I started renting it, I think it was worth about, I want to say maybe like 300,000 or just under. And by the time it got to it, it was now in the 400,000 mark and above. So it had increased a lot. I was living in Leighton, East London, which is like an area that is very up and coming. A lot of people were moving there. So it had really increased the property prices. So then I thought, okay, so I spoke to my parents, and they were like, look, why don't you think about doing shared ownership, but elsewhere? It doesn't have to be in East London. So I was like, okay. So then I did like a search, or I put a search alert on, and I can't remember, maybe it's the London, there's like a shared ownership website for the UK, maybe. I put in what I was looking for, like 2-bedroom, put in a price range, and then I'll just get alerts. And then this place came up in Chigwell, which is when I went to view it, and I liked it, so I put an offer in.
How much did it cost you, and what share of the property did you buy?
So I thought I was only going to get 25%. So
that's what you wanted to buy?
Yeah, that's what I wanted, was 25%. And I didn't really think I could afford any more. And then I went through the process where you basically tell them that you're interested, and then they assess your income, your savings, and it turns out that actually I could afford 65%. They were like, because you could afford 65%, you have to buy 65%.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that. I think they think they can choose to buy whatever percentage they can afford to buy, but they basically maximize your affordability. So if you can afford 65, then you have to buy 65.
Exactly. Yes, and I was fine with that. So the property price was 305,000, and
Mhm.
I bought 65%, so that came in at 198,250.
And what were your monthly costs when you owned
I've
65%
got
of
it written
the
down,
property?
so I'm just
Okay.
gonna have a look
Yeah,
at
no.
what it was, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So my mortgage was £832 a month, and that was on a 3.99% 2-year fixed rate. My monthly rent payments when I first purchased was set at about 245, and service charge was approximately around 150. And then there was an annual ground rent of £100 per annum.
So how much were the monthly costs? So the rent,
So
mortgage,
in
and
total,
service charge?
I think it was around 1,300.
So yeah, why did you decide to sell? Because when did you sell, and why did you decide to sell?
So I was renting, as I said, in Leighton,
Yeah.
and then I moved to Chigwell. So it's only roughly around a 30-minute drive away, but it was a countryside development, so it did
Okay.
feel far. And on the one hand, I liked it because, to be honest, I'd had enough of the sirens and the loud noises and everything else. I was like, oh, let me get some tranquility. So I moved to Chigwell, but then it turned out to be too tranquil, and I didn't really expect that. And it was literally like maybe a 40-minute walk to the nearest station.
Okay.
So I had to drive, which was fine. I didn't mind driving, but it just felt too far. And then I just thought I really want to move back a bit more centrally into London, and also buy something outright. My salary had increased.
Okay.
I had more money saved, so I could afford to do something outright.
So would you have been able to buy 100% of your flat?
If I wanted to, yeah.
You would have been able to,
Actually,
but
no, sorry, I
no,
couldn't.
you still wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, because when I
Yeah.
actually asked, yeah, I couldn't have done
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the myths about shared ownership. It's supposed to be a form of sort of ownership where you can staircase to 100%, but in reality, it's not very realistic. So, like to go from 25% to like 50%, you essentially need your salary to double to be able to afford a mortgage to actually buy that part of the property. And it's surprising even to hear, like, even at 65%, when your salary increased, you still weren't able to buy 100% of that property.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, that's a bit crazy.
And you
And
have to go through like the whole buying process all over again.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you have to get, you have to get a valuation done for the
yeah,
property,
yeah.
and you have to go through, basically you have to go through the whole process again.
And so if they said that you were able to afford 100% of the property, do you reckon you would have done it even though you weren't
Um,
completely happy with the location?
I wouldn't have. It
You
didn't
wouldn't,
seem
yeah.
right.
Hmm. So you bought when was it? January
So
2018.
2018, and then I put it on the market in September 2019. Yeah.
So basically a year and 9 months you were there,
Yeah.
or yeah, a year and 9 months, which isn't long at all. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
To sort of to make a decision in such a short space of time. But you were obviously completely unhappy with the location,
Yeah, and
A-
I was ready to move back centrally.
and that was the main thing. It wasn't anything to do with like the cost or the building itself.
The costs are reasonable, to be fair. I mean, I know I would have been paying probably more if I was renting,
Hmm.
because especially in London, or around the same price. So
Hmm.
it wasn't that.
I think it's useful. This is the main reason I wanted to talk to you, and it was just to go through the selling process so people know what they're getting themselves into if they buy into a shared ownership property. Because, as we said, it's unlikely that people are going to be able to staircase to 100%. So, the most realistic way that people are going to be able to buy a property outright is by probably selling their shared ownership property and then looking for a property that's at a lower price and going somewhere
Yeah,
else. So this is something that probably most people are going to have to end up doing. So
yeah.
can you talk me through the process of selling a shared ownership property?
Sure. So I'm not sure if it's different for each housing association, but for mine, they had just different requirements that I needed to do. So the first thing is that you just need to notify them and tell them that you're looking to sell. Then you need to get an independent valuation. Now, when most people sell their properties, they usually just get an estate agent in, they come in, they have a look at properties that have sold within that area, they do like an average price, and then they'll give you a market valuation. But the housing association said to me that I needed to get an actual rich chartered surveyor to come in and do the valuation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that I had to do, and that was £270 to do that. They gave you a list that you could choose from, or you could choose your own. They were flexible. They didn't have to. You could choose
What
from
did you
there.
decide to do? Did you use one of
I
theirs,
think
or
I
did
just
you?
did my own. I just went for one that was in Essex, which
Okay.
is one.
Did you get a number of quotes, or did you just go to
Yeah,
one
I've got 2 or 3 quotes
and
actually.
they were all around the same
Yeah, they were
amount?
all literally. Yeah, I think mine was probably one of the cheapest ones.
Okay, cool.
So I booked it. They came and they did pictures, did the valuation, and then that gets sent off to the housing association.
Mm-hmm.
And then the housing association will then they have to agree that this is reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
and they did.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, okay, now we get an 8-week nomination period to sell your share of the property. So,
Were there any fees that you had to pay to the housing association to, and at that stage, just
at
to,
this point, yes, there was an administration
and
fee.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that
for them,
was just
for them
basically for them to look at the valuation and to put it
and
up as well.
exactly,
Yeah.
which is not really doing anything.
And do
Um,
you remember how much that was?
I think it was around 135.
130. Okay, cool.
So yeah, so then they did that, and then basically the idea is that they are now going to attempt to sell your 65% or your whatever your share is,
Mm-hmm.
via their shared ownership platform.
How did that go?
So my property had increased. So I bought it for 305,000, and the valuers valued it at 320,000.
Oh wow,
So
that's good.
therefore, yeah, I mean, yeah, it meant that the share had increased. So I think I bought my share was 198,250, and it was now like 208,000.
Okay.
Therefore, you needed like roughly around a £20,000 deposit.
Yeah.
So I didn't get many viewings, and the one viewing I did get, the person was like, this is far too expensive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to come and see it because the development was quite like known and popular.
Yeah.
So they were interested, but they just said this is far too expensive.
And I don't think people realize that you have to, so because you own 65% of your home, you had to find somebody that was willing to buy 65% of your home.
Exactly.
You couldn't sell 25% and get the housing association to buy the rest. Did they have any options like that where, as part of that transaction, you sell 25% um to the next person, and then the housing association buys back 40%? Is that an option, or it
They
was an
did,
option for you?
yeah. And just to give you a comparison, so
Yeah.
my neighbor next door is now in the process of selling her 1 bed.
Mm-hmm.
He bought 25%, and she had 4 offers within a week.
Oh, wow.
And our properties are basically similar, but mine's better because it's got the second bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
and it's front facing, so the sun would come in. I'm overlooking this really nice national park and golf course, etc. She doesn't have that, but because she only bought 25%, her property is valued at like 255. Literally within a week, she had 4 offers.
Yeah, so that's so the more you buy of that property, the harder it's going to be to sell through the housing association. And in terms of like so weren't they flexible on that £320,000? Couldn't you sort of
So
talk to them and say like, all right, no one's buying it at this price. It's not realistic. We're not going to sell it. Can we lower the price?
so they didn't really care, and just to be blatant,
Yeah.
their answer was, well, you need to speak to the valuers and see if they will lower the price. But at the time, the properties within that area were going for that price, so it wouldn't have been. They were basing it off the data that they had.
Yeah.
So it
So the
made
price
sense.
was fixed.
It was fixed, and they said to me that if you do want to accept lower, then you will have to pay the difference to us.
Which no one's going to do.
Um,
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense to do. So you didn't get even. You only got one. You
I had
only got
one
one viewing.
viewing.
That's insane. That's crazy. And then, so what happened after those 8 weeks?
So after the 8 weeks, you get the opportunity to sell it on the open market. So that's basically where you go through an estate agent and you sell 100% of the property. So my mum and a few of my mum's friends had used Purple Bricks. My mum has been buying and selling properties for years. And mainly done in East London, and she's made quite a lot of money because she just has like an eye for this.
Yeah.
So
Is that her main sort of bread and butter sort of property?
Actually not, no, she's actually an assistant head teacher.
Oh wow.
But she's really good with property.
Yeah.
So she always used Purple Bricks, and one of her friends, she was like, use them, and I said, yeah, okay, great, I'll do that. So Purple Bricks came round. They did the pictures, their own type of pictures, and did the listing. So Purple Bricks charge a fixed fee of 1,600.
Okay.
And then whereas an estate agent will usually charge between the 1% to 2% mark. But the thing with Purple Bricks, and what I didn't realize, is that they're an online platform essentially, and basically people will go on to Rightmove or Zoopla or something else, will see your property, then it goes through to the Purple Bricks portal, and then they can make view interviews. So everything's done online, so you don't have an estate agent who is out there actively trying to get buyers for you. So for my mum and her friends, they've only ever bought in London now, which is a lot easier to sell than it is for me, who was in this, obscure countryside development. So you would only live there if you wanted to live there, if that made sense. So it was a lot harder for me to get viewings because they weren't actively out there trying to find them, and which is why you only pay 1,600 rather than the 1%, which would have cost me like 3,200 or whatever.
If you're not in a highly sought after area, you need somebody actively trying to get you viewings. Exactly. Oh, that's a good tip. So what happened with Purple Bricks? You were with them for how long? Didn't end up getting any viewings through Purple Bricks?
I did. So they listed it. I think it was by the time the Housing Association had got their stuff done and that 8-week nomination period, I think we were moving to sort of December. So Purple Bricks listed it on Boxing Day. And I did have a few viewings in the January, February, up until obviously the lockdown in March. But so I may have had like 4 viewings, and the feedback was, this is too expensive. Why is it 320,000? Would you be able to accept any lower? And I couldn't, obviously, because then I would have to pay that difference myself to L&Q. So it wasn't, it didn't really work for me using Purple Bricks.
So you first tried to sell in September 2019?
So September 2019 was when the 8-week nomination period started for housing.
And then so that took you up until?
That took me up until sort of December. The Housing Association were quite slow with getting everything done. So they didn't actually, so even though I'd notified them in the August, they didn't actually list it until the 30th of September. So then they had their 2 months, and then that brought me into like the December period. Then they listed it on Boxing Day.
You listed it on Boxing Day. That was at Purple Bricks. And then it was there for how long?
So it stayed on until I decided to go with an independent estate agent in June. So it stayed on for 6 months.
Oh wow. And you got how many viewings over 6 months?
Well, so between January and before lockdown, so between January and March, I had about 4. And then we had the lockdown, and then I may have had like another 2 or 3.
So that's not very many at all. 6, So I see your point. It's not, Purple Bricks isn't the one if you're not in a highly sought after. And I'm guessing between this period as well, your valuations probably expired.
Yes.
So
the valuation, when I got it, it was for 3 months. And then what they can do is extend it for a further 3 months with no fee. And then by the time I went, after the COVID, the restrictions were lifted, I then had to get another valuation. But because I'd already done it, they only charged me a further £96, I think it was.
Okay. And I'm guessing that was just like a desktop exercise rather than coming to your house again. So what happened with Purple Brick after it wasn't working and you had an independent agent contact you?
So even when the property dropped, so the first drop.
So it dropped on Purple Brick before you?
Yeah, so it dropped after COVID, after lockdown, it dropped. down to something like 298.
298 from 320.
Yeah.
And so, and you bought for 305, so it dropped in value by 7,000.
Yeah.
And that was mainly probably just because of COVID, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
During that time, I had an independent estate agent. He put a letter through my door, and he was like, "Look, I can see your property is not selling on Purple Bricks, so maybe I can help you. I live in the area. I know the area very well, but I will obviously charge a 1% if I find a buyer." So, I mean, I wasn't thrilled at having to go with somebody else, but at the same time, I was like, this clearly isn't selling. Um,
If
so
you want to
let
sell, you're gonna need to
and I
do
was
something different.
exactly.
Mhm.
So yeah, so he managed to, and then he managed to find a buyer within 5 days.
Within five. So, how many viewings did you have? That was the first viewing.
I think he booked in two, and the first person who came put an offer in.
Oh wow, wow,
Yeah.
wow, wow, wow. That's crazy. And that was when? When was that offer made?
That was July 2020.
It's July 2020.
So now it has almost been a year.
Was that after the announcement about stamp duty holiday?
Yes, it
Yeah, it
was. Yeah.
was. So probably the fact that your property dropped in value and that stamp duty holiday is the reason that you're able to sell. Okay, so you got an offer on your place. You got a willing buyer. What happens next? What's the process from having an offer to actually completing your sale?
Okay, so the next thing that I needed to do was get a memorandum of sale. Well, I needed to appoint a lawyer, and I
Hmm.
also needed to get a memorandum of sale. So the memorandum of sale would then be sent. I think the estate agent draws that up,
Hmm.
and then that's sent across to the housing association. And then the idea is that the housing association then notify their lawyers,
Hmm.
and then their lawyers will contact mine, and then we can then we'll get the buyers solicitors involved, and then basically you get things rolling.
So it's not so it's your solicitors plus the housing association solicitors. Do you have to pay for the housing association solicitors?
You do.
And how much they charge? How much they?
So this particular one I paid 455.
Okay, not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah.
And then how much did your own solicitor cost?
I've got it all here. I think it was 2,600.
2,600, which to be honest, I can't even remember how much I was charged when I tried to sell. But it doesn't. I don't think that's too unusual. I don't. I
No,
don't
no, no,
know. Yeah,
yeah, it wasn't.
sort of typical. Yeah,
I
yeah,
got a few quotes, but I went with this guy because he had done some work for the estate agent previously.
yeah. Okay.
So I thought, let me just keep it. If you know him, let's just
Yeah,
do
yeah,
that.
yeah. Keep it neat.
Mm.
So okay, so you had involved. So you had your solicitor and I'm guessing your solicitor was the lead solicitor, and they just contacted or they were in communication with the housing association.
No.
Oh,
So the way, unfortunately, with the housing association is that they don't assign you one person. So whenever you want to speak to them, you have to go through the contact center, and you can get through to anybody. So then you have to explain the situation. And a lot of the time I was repeating myself 50,000 times, saying, "Hi, I'm selling my property." And they're like, "Oh, have you done evaluation? Yes, yes, I've done all of that."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was like I had to kind of explain. But the issue that I had actually is that my housing association didn't receive or didn't open the email with the memorandum of sale.
Oh,
So they didn't instruct their solicitors until 6 weeks later.
oh, wow.
Yeah, and so because my solicitor was like, so also I had to get a management pack,
Okay.
and basically had all information about my property and the management company, and that was going to be sent to the buyer's solicitors, and I had to pay £240 for that. Yeah,
But that's normal with leaseholds, isn't it? The management pack.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I had to do that, and then also the buyer solicitor also asked for the accounts, and that was a
Okay.
further £240, which I wasn't aware of. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So that wasn't part of the management pack, the account. Oh,
So
wow. Yeah, I
so
didn't know that.
twice, which I was obviously not impressed about. So then, whilst all that was happening, and the buyer was trying to get a mortgage, and then the mortgage, obviously, his lenders had to come round and do a valuation, a survey. The surveyor had to come round and whatever. So all that's happening. So I'm thinking, okay, so all that's happening, the housing association must be doing their bit in the background. But during this time, they were doing nothing because my memorandum of sale hadn't been passed on. So it got to sort of like, so that I informed them on the 30th of July, and by September, I still hadn't heard anything. So 2 weeks into September, my solicitor's like, look, I still haven't heard anything from the housing association. So I was like, okay, let me phone. So I phoned the housing association. They say, oh, you're going to need to contact our lawyers and find out like what's going on. So I was like, so you guys can't tell me? And they were like, no, sorry, we're really understaffed. We're really under.
Wow.
We can't help you.
Yeah. I'm guessing genuinely COVID might not have helped, but I'm guessing it's not much better in normal times
Yeah,
anyway.
they were really unresponsive. And whenever I called them, they were just extremely unhelpful. And I can't even talk about it because it was just too irritating.
So how long did it take to get to exchange?
Okay, so we exchanged. It was a really close exchange and completion, which was again the housing association's delay. So we exchanged on a Friday, which I can't remember the date, but it was on a Friday, and then we completed on the following Tuesday.
Oh, okay. That's short.
In November. So this was all in November.
November. Oh wow. So from July to November, how long is that? That's August, September, October. Yeah, so four months. Yeah. Jeez.
At this point, I was worried that I was going to lose the buyer because and the process was taking longer because of the housing association element and because of the fact that we had to keep dealing with their solicitors, and then they weren't getting responses from the housing association. So it was just like there were so many parties involved. It just made things a lot slower.
So how did the actual sale work? Did you just sell your 65% to the new person, and the housing associations sold their, was it 35% to the new person? You just sell your shares directly to them.
I think how it works is that on completion, there's a simultaneous transaction of a staircase and a sale. So you do a staircase up to the 100%. So that was me effectively buying the remaining 35%.
With the money that this person was giving you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it's sold to them.
That's insane. I don't know why they do it in such a complicated way.
Well, because unless they can sell it via the shared ownership way to begin with, then you have to sell it 100%. So they wouldn't have allowed any other. I know what you're saying. But
it has to. You have to have 100% in order to sell 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. So what? So did they charge you an additional cost to staircase? So I know normally there's a charge to staircase.
So within the legal fees, I think they also had extra fees for dealing with the housing association's solicitors.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't usually have to do that.
Your solicitors charge you a bit more. Okay.
They would only usually have to deal with the other party to the transaction.
Yeah.
So they had a fee for that, and then I think there was like an extra fee of around 225 plus VAT for the staircasing.
Jeez.
And I compared that. So I went onto like a website. You can do comparisons for legal fees and stuff.
Yeah.
So I've done that, and each one came back saying they charge an extra charge for the staircasing.
And was that an additional fee to the fee they were charging just to have the chat with, or just to communicate directly with the housing association? So there were two additional fees: the staircasing and just dealing with a third solicitor.
Exactly.
Wow,
So to liaise with the housing association, they charged £114.
The housing association charged £114.
So my solicitor charged me an extra £114 for dealing with the housing association solicitor.
Wow. So in total, how much did it cost to sell your shared ownership?
This is so painful because I didn't even add up. But I did.
Yeah.
And it was 8,817.
8,817.
I had an early redemption fee for my mortgage.
Oh, the early okay.
I was in a 2-year fixed.
Yeah.
And until the 27th of November, right? But it came out on the 18th, and I still had and I had to pay 3,700.
Couldn't you delay the completion?
To be honest, at that point,
you were just trying to get out.
I
Yeah,
couldn't take any risk because
yeah,
the housing association were messing me about.
yeah. Hmm.
The buyer was getting,
A
he was
bit
good,
agitated, just
but
yeah.
I just thought, you know what, this isn't worth it. It's not.
Yeah. Did you make a loss from selling it?
So I actually only made a loss of £500.
Which is pretty good considering the fact that it cost you 8,000 to sell it, and the fact that also um the property reduced in value. So like the fact you came
What
out,
happened? The equity that I had got
yeah,
eaten by the fees and the
yeah, yeah,
costs.
yeah. So basically, because you're paying down your mortgage over that whole period, you had a bit
Exactly.
of, you had more equity in it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so 8,800. So, but that includes, I guess, the cost with
That includes
Purple
the
Brick,
redemption. Yeah, yeah. The
yeah,
purple brick.
redemption as well.
Yeah,
So, do you know how much of that 8,000 was the redemption, the mortgage redemption fee?
3,760
3,000. So that would take it down to that would
about.
take it down to 4,900 or something around there.
Yeah.
So, and then the I guess Pebble Brick you sort of paid for, but then you didn't sell it through them. So I
Yeah.
guess if you take that off, it would be like 3,600 ish or 3,300. Yeah, but yeah. But that's crazy. But I guess the tips you could give to someone selling then is if you're not in a highly sought after area, don't and you really and you're serious about selling, maybe get a local estate agent that understands the area that can pull in people to sell it, and then also try and sell at the end of your mortgage term, I guess, so you're
If
not paying early redemption.
exactly, if you, yeah, get as close exactly if you can. So I think the fees drop depending on when you sell. So
Hmm.
I think if I'd have sold, I can't remember the term. I think when I first put the flat on the market in 2019, the fees were 5,000 something.
Oh wow!
So it would have been more.
And
Um,
you were still willing to sell, knowing that that was going to be the cost.
yeah, and also because it had been valued at 320, so
Okay, yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I thought it would be fine. It would just get eaten
yeah.
up. It was balanced out.
So what have you done since? Have you bought another place?
So I'm renting at the moment, and that's just because, to be honest, I was quite traumatized
Not
by the
surprising.
whole process. I got really a lot of stress and anxiety.
Mhm.
I got hives, I got like lumps all over my skin.
Jeez.
I had like it was just so stressful,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's the whole it's outside of your control. So there's nothing that you can do.
yeah. Mhm,
The housing association element made it a lot worse for
mhm,
me.
mhm.
And like I said, my mum has bought and sold properties, and she was just like, "What is going on?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, why are you having to go through all of this?" And it was because of the housing association element, I think, added the multiple parties
yeah,
chasing
yeah,
people, speaking to different people all the time,
yeah,
having to
yeah,
explain yourself. It just added a lot of stress. So now I'm renting at the
yeah.
moment.
Buying and selling a home that you live in is stressful enough. Having to go through all of these other steps because you're dealing with a housing association is just gonna make it even worse. So yeah, it's not. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Not surprised. So, all right, based on your experience of shared ownership, so you've bought it, you've lived in it, you've sold it. Um, I guess two questions. Would you recommend, or what would would you recommend shared ownership to anyone? And if somebody, even despite your advice, whether it was, maybe you could look into it, but be careful or completely stay away from it, what tips would you give to them if they did decide to go for shared ownership, please?
The issue that I have is that when it comes to buying properties, I feel like there's this huge pressure and this whole thing of just buy a property, get on the property ladder. And
Hmm.
our generation, we're like obsessed with buying properties, and because our parents did it, and people say you're wasting money because you're renting, so just buy somewhere. So
Hmm.
that was the mentality that I had, which
Hmm.
is why I shared ownership, because I didn't have enough money to do outright.
Hmm.
So I think the main pro of a shared ownership is that you get on the property ladder. But for me, that's the only pro.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it just depends on how badly you want to get on the property ladder. If it really means a lot to you
Hmm.
and you don't have enough to do outright, then yes, this is obviously an option for you. This is an avenue for you.
Hmm.
And if you do go ahead with it, I would say just read all the documentation beforehand. Ask what is the process around selling, because to be honest, if I'd have known all of this, or if I'd have really understood, it's not to say that the documentation was there, but nobody outright was like, well, this is what's going to happen to you when you sell. So I may have thought twice. So I think it's really important to like go through all the costs, go through all the restrictions, understand the selling process, and just try to get as much information as possible to start out with. So there are hard, you can reduce the surprises that come up.
I think you made a good point there. I think, as you said, even if you were to sort of read the process of selling a shared ownership place on paper, you probably think, oh, okay, there's some additional steps here, but okay, I mean, you can get it done. But I think what's really valuable from you is that you're given sort of first-hand experience of what it's actually like. So it's not just a bit of writing on paper, like your experience, how it made you feel, like all the steps, what went wrong. It's a real experience. I think that's going to be a lot more helpful to somebody thinking about shared ownership, hearing your experience. If somebody decides to still go ahead and get a shared ownership place after sort of listening to your experience, I think there'll be a lot more, they're going to be a lot less surprised by the process and how difficult it could be. So yeah, I think it's useful to have people like you actually share your experience so people know what it's like. Because as we were talking about at the start, the scheme isn't that transparent. It sort of just paints a rosy picture of what the scheme's about. So Alex, if people want to find you, how can they find you?
So you can check out my YouTube channel, Alex's blog, and it's the same for Instagram, Alex's blog as well. You can find me.
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you, Alex, for sharing your story, and yeah, hopefully people find it useful.
Yeah, hopefully it helps somebody. And yeah, if people have questions, I mean, they can find me on those channels and ask me any further questions.